Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 63. I'm your host, Joe Hannon. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming back once again. If you're new to the podcast, strap yourselves in for some high weirdness. I'm not high right now, but I mean that in the sense that this podcast is highly weird. Man, it has been one of the strangest weeks in my professional life. I wish I could talk about any of this, but I can't. Beyond the fact that it's just been really weird. And in addition to the weirdness, we're adding another layer here of a tremendous learning opportunity. I feel like I've learned more in 1 week about what I value in human beings and where I need to grow as an individual than I have in perhaps 37 some odd years of existence. And in a lot of ways, I feel like all of the training I've been doing, whether that be jiu-jitsu, meditation, therapy, the coaching sessions that I'm doing, it was all building toward this week. And what I want you to think about, having listened to that little piece there, was where you might be limiting yourself. Because I certainly have a long track record of limiting myself, and I still do it, and I still have a long way to go. But I think that had I not gone about taking my shit on in a really gut-wrenching and systematic way, I don't think I would have handled the past week as well as I did. And ultimately, I turned something that could very well prove still to be a disastrous thing for me in the long term into at least a learning opportunity with some real net positives and some real personal growth. So that's a story I hope I can tell you someday. I can't tell it now because there's confidentiality reasons at play, and also the story's not over yet. I went to bed thinking one thing last night and woke up to quite another different reality over a bowl of oatmeal this morning. You know, John Prine knew something about revelations over bowls of oatmeal. I don't know what's going to happen. If you listened to my last episode, the refrain of "we'll see" was as much for you as it is for me. We will see, or maybe we won't. It depends on which system of beliefs you subscribe to. I suppose if you're more of the Western Christ-centered canon, then we will see. In the end, there will be this revelation. But if you're more of the Eastern frame of mind, there is no seeing to be seen. It's just part of the cosmic drama playing out. But we'll see where we won't see. Either way, it's going to be interesting. Anyway, what I do have for you this week is some reflections that I can share based on that experience. And I want to share reflections relative to this idea of rank and status. Rank and status, two of the most hand-wringing, anxiety-provoking things, I think, in the existence of modern man. And it's really fascinating to see how they operate in the confined settings of a jiu-jitsu school. I've been training jiu-jitsu now, I think, for like 8 years. I'd have to go back and do the math. I have seen so many sour grapes reactions in others and in myself over the years pertaining to rank. Some of them extreme, some of them subtle, variations in intensity, all equally fascinating. I think we get hung up on rank or status on and off the mats because, let's just face it, here I'm going to put on my Jordan Peterson hat for a second, which may offend some of you. This is just not the podcast for you then, I guess. And I say that, I'm certainly not like a Jordan Peterson fanboy, but I think there's some signal amid the noise. And this is one of the pieces of signal. It's that hierarchy is indeed real, folks. Hierarchy is a thing we encounter. I think that's indisputable. Certainly indisputable in a jiu-jitsu academy where you have people of different ranks literally lining up in rank order at the beginning and end of class. Hierarchy is a thing, okay? It's unavoidable. And in jiu-jitsu on the mats, that hierarchy is largely like a proxy for competence. And this is relative, of course, meaning like not all black belts are the same. For example, in my competition in New York, I used the sweep single that Josh Hinger has perfected at a high level, so much so that pretty much everybody knows he's going to do it to him in the gi and they can't stop it, right? I'm a black belt too. Am I Josh Hinger? No. I could go to Marcelo's in New York City and get my ass kicked, I'm sure, by purple belts and blue belts, maybe even some white belt who's like a sick Division III wrestler or D1. I forget how the divisions work in college. Somebody can correct me on that. Either way, somebody with a modicum of wrestling experience and a white belt could destroy me if we were starting from our feet. This is a reality. But regardless, this proxy for competence, even though it's imperfect, is there in jiu-jitsu, for better or for worse. I think personally for better. And we sort of encounter this proxy for competence signified by hierarchy and status in all sorts of ways in life. And while it works somewhat efficiently in jiu-jitsu, it breaks down in other places. But whereas like on the mats, the signifier of status is the color of your belt, in other areas in life, it's different things. Like you could even look at this geographically, for example. Let's take the Northeast, which is an area of the country I'm really familiar with. My wife moved to New Jersey to be a photographer at the Star Ledger newspaper where we worked. And she moved from the suburbs of Atlanta. So not super country south at all. In some ways, my upbringing was more country than hers. But the status and currency of hierarchy in the Northeast is drastically different from the South. Like, for example, when she moved here, the first thing I ever gave her was a copy of The Great Gatsby, because I said, if you want to understand how things work in the Northeast, read this book. If you haven't already, most of us have, but read it through that lens. Read this as an explainer of status and hierarchy, meaning the currency of status and hierarchy in the Northeast, particularly in the New York area, is money. How much wealth you have. This largely determines how you stack up against everybody else. This is kind of the yardstick that everybody uses. In Washington, D.C., for example, it's power. Wealth and power go hand in hand. Like, I think that's pretty indisputable. But if you're in the Beltway, where you rank relative to everybody else is often determined by power, because it's the seat of power of our country. Travel 3,000 miles across the country to Los Angeles, and it's fame. And that fame as a metric of hierarchy, or sort of a ranker of hierarchy, is a fascinating thing, because you see things like my wife, as sort of a way of decompressing at the end of the day, will watch shows like the Vanderpump Rules, or as I like to call them, the Plumpies. And these people are essentially, in addition to being some of the most revolting human beings on the planet, that's mean. I should walk that back. Some of the most fundamentally flawed and unevolved people on the planet. They're also celebrities in large part because of that. But there are various other domains through which we can determine status for these people. Presumably they have some money, but I'm sure there are wealthier people in Los Angeles than them. They're not particularly intelligent. They're not particularly evolved, as I mentioned. They're not particularly powerful, but they do have a lot of fame. And because they have fame, because they have entertainment value, they have some sort of modicum of social status. Like, for example, another show my wife likes to watch is, I think it's called Summer House. It's on the same channel. But like, two of these jokers got to go to the White House for some like Memorial Day thing. Like, who the fuck are these people that they're going to the White House? And they're going to the White House because they have this metric of fame, and perhaps they have, in addition to that metric of fame, they have a metric of power. Maybe they're connected somewhere to the power hub. So, Northeast, money; DC, power; Los Angeles, fame. The South, I'm not sure what determines status in the South. I have to ask my wife about this. I don't know if it's like college football rankings or something like that. Have to investigate this a little bit further. I'm thinking about these things in real time as I'm talking to people. either way, we have these various markers of status and power which break down regionally. And it's not just confined to regions, it's confined to all sorts of domains. And we can determine status, rank, power, not just by any one of these things, but we can do like a triangulation of multiple factors to determine how somebody stacks up. So all of that really doesn't apply on the jiu-jitsu mats, but it does apply out in the world. Now, the phenomenon that I've observed over and over again as a consultant trying to help people improve their performance, or as a coach trying to help people improve their performance, is I often see people confusing rank or status in one domain with rank or status across multiple domains. For example, somebody might think because they have a lot of money, therefore they are very intelligent, or they're a thought leader. Or somebody might think that because they have a lot of power, they have a lot of emotional depth or empathy or insight into the human psyche or whatever. That very well may be true. There are people contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman once said so beautifully. But we're lopsided, right? We're not, just because we're a black belt doesn't mean we're a black belt across all domains, is the point that I'm trying to make. In truth, we're all white belts at many things. Like, I am a white belt at learning how to express my feelings in an efficient and effective and a contextualized way. I'm a white belt in learning to be compassionate toward myself. Like, these are things that I'm working on. I'm a white belt entrepreneur. I'm trying to build a business, multiple businesses, the jiu-jitsu school, this podcast, my coaching and consulting work. There are so many things that I just don't know. And there's a real power and liberation in being honest with that and taking a full assessment of what you don't know. And when I'm working with a lot of people, especially like really powerful professionals, they confuse their competence in the professional realm or in a niche in the professional realm with universal competence. And this is also something I find is more pronounced in men than women, and I don't know why. But it seems to me like men tend to confuse competence in one domain with competence across multiple domains to the point of looking really stupid. And of course, looking stupid is a beautiful thing. It's ultimately what jumpstarts the learning process if we're conscious to the fact that we're looking stupid. And that's a subject that I'll be exploring in depth in a short story, which I'll be publishing in the inaugural issue of Power Trip. But anyway, this confusion occurs. And I think so much of my work to do as a coach is helping people see this confusion and then equipping people with skills and systems to navigate it. And essentially, the higher purpose of that process is not to accrue more wealth and status or fame or whatever metric we're using to determine where we stand in the hierarchy. It's not that. The ultimate goal of helping people see this and equip them with skills to navigate this dynamic is to liberate them. I had this real moment of clarity the other day when I was meeting with Josh and Emily the other, I want to say it was like sometime late last week. And this, it was like somebody rang a church bell in my head, and the church bell was ringing something to the tune of, it is your job where you sit in this chair to help liberate people. Ultimately, I'm helping them liberate themselves. I can't do that for them. I don't know if anybody can do that for you, but I can help people see where they're blocked and help them find their own path toward releasing that block or overcoming it. And I think, this is not new news, what I'm about to say, but I think in order to overcome that obstruction, to find a path around that block, to find a new way of being, you need a system or an ecology of practices. And I think that's why jiu-jitsu has like this potent attractor quality for so many people, is because it combines physical conditioning with a cultivation of mental resilience and real-time problem solving. And all of that is great, right? And we can train jiu-jitsu in isolation just to do it as a sport or a pastime or to get fit, and that's all great too. But the more I do this work of coaching, the more I realize that that just isn't enough if your goal is to be truly liberated. The human condition is so nuanced and so complex that just attacking the physical domain or addressing the physical domain is insufficient to accomplishing what we want to do, because we're more than just a body. Most of us don't even realize we have a body. Fortunately, if you do jiu-jitsu, you're keenly aware of the fact that you have a body because you're living in pretty much constant chronic pain. But many people in the sport neglect that they also have a mind, a soul, a spirit. And this is sort of where the layered practices of mindfulness and journaling come in. And those layers are essential to, I think, transcending this limiting belief of a hierarchy or status. And that's not to say that hierarchy and status aren't real, because I said at the top of the episode, they're fucking real. We all know what it's like to be the low person on the totem pole, and hopefully all of us have had the experience too of being the high person on the totem pole. We know that there's a certain social dynamic and interpersonal dynamic and inner quality to all of those experiences. But we also know that the beautiful things in life happen when we can overcome them. Or perhaps we don't know that, but we yearn to know it. It's certainly the case with me. I'm not sitting here telling you this shit like I have mastered it. I, hopefully like you, have just had glimpses of it. And the more I chip away at it, the closer I get to actually living this way with some consistency. But all of this is to say that in order to overcome this obsession with rank and to truly cultivate depth of skills, presence, and mastery, to function optimally, we need to do better in understanding where we need to grow. And that is fucking painful. That really sucks. That is a long and arduous process for many of us, but it's truly essential, because it's unrealistic to think that because we have achieved a certain amount of competency in one domain that we're complete humans. And this is the secret sauce that I hope everybody in the professional world who is looking to level up their performance, this is the secret sauce I hope you take away from this podcast. That simply is not enough. If I could go back to my 25-year-old self and say, hey man, just because you're probably like the youngest news editor in the country doesn't mean you know fucking anything. You know nothing. You are essentially starting from zero every single day. And man, I feel like I should tattoo that on my forehead some days. And perhaps you feel the same way. But we all end up in a better place when we have this hard conversation with ourselves, facilitated through these interlocking practices. And we all come away with a better understanding of where we need to grow. But ultimately, that information is just one part of it. There's a choice to actually do the work of integrating it. And that work is difficult, but it's certainly worth it. So that's what I've got for you this week. I'll let you know what's going on with me as soon as I can. I don't know when that's going to be. Regardless, go to bjjmeditations.com. If you want to work with me in a coaching capacity, that's where you can schedule time to do it. You could also make donations there via Venmo to offset the production cost of the podcast. Again, 1% of all revenues prior to taxes goes to support environmental charities. Go and check out the highest levels on BJJ Mental Models Premium. That's where Emily and Kwok and I talk about what we do in greater depth in our peak performance consulting space. Of course, if you're digging the podcast, like, subscribe, review, share wherever you're listening or watching. Follow us on BJJ_meditations. It's on Instagram. You can read my work at Substack, johannon.substack.com. And finally, all of you are welcome to come and train at Princeton Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anytime you want. Just be nice and bring some clean apparel. And if you don't have any clean apparel, we happen to sell some. So if you want to buy some, that's fine too. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll talk next week.